One of the things you should learn as a young prosecutor is just because something can be prosecuted doesn't mean it has to be prosecuted. And I hear that and I see that as a defense attorney now. Well, he did this or he did that, but what social purpose is being served by prosecuting? For example, a recent case, a Japanese couple in the United States, they had a fight, a disagreement. There were allegations of domestic violence on both sides. They live in Japan. They moved back to Japan. San Francisco District Attorney's Office filed criminal charges with an intent on prosecuting them, in spite of the fact that the alleged victim did not want it. She had to get her own attorney, finally convinced the prosecutor to drop the charge, but only after a lot of unnecessary court time, attention, expense on the part of both the defendant, my client, and the alleged victim. You need somebody who knows what it's all about, somebody who knows where the Hall of Justice is, somebody who's been in court on almost a daily basis, someone with institutional knowledge of the system to be able to deal with these kind of problems.
As I said, in the tumble dry cycle, we're in the 21st century. The job of the DA has got to be to protect the citizens from the most dangerous and violent criminals. That's got to be our first priority. The murderers, the rapists, the child molesters. And in the 21st century, one of the key ways in which you do that is DNA evidence. We have, under the prior police chief, Gascon, 700 cases that got dumped because the criminalist was ingesting rather than testing the dope. After that, we have had outsourcing to the tune of over $1 million a year for the crime lab. We've had promises that we're going to have staffing there, and yet we've got 4 out of the 11 techs working there. And most recently, and I've got to say, so troubling to hear in SF Weekly the other day that we have evidence of really a cover-up.
First of all, let's get the record straight. The lab doesn't need to be recertified. The DNA section of the lab has been certified, as well as every other part of the lab, with the exception of controlled substances, which I personally took them out because I knew that we were not in a good position to deal with that part. The fact is that DOJ did look at the lab, and DOJ did look at the DNA lab before and after the Rock Hartman allegations, and they determined that the lab was fine. What you have seen in that article, quite frankly, is a lot of old stuff and a lot of half-truth. All that information was provided to the courts, and a judge in this superior court in San Francisco determined that there was enough information that she felt comfortable continuing with prosecution. So I think that you see a lot of misinformation going on and a lot of old stuff being rehashed and reshaped over and over again. Whether the lab should be run by a separate entity or the police department, it's really not the issue. The issue is whether you have the right control sets and whether you have the right funding in order to run the lab appropriately. This is a lab that has been starved for funding for many, many years. This is a lab where you had criminals that were doing 3 and 4 times the work that is the standard in the industry. This is a lab that had horrible working conditions, and it was neglected by police commission and by other politicians in the city for many, many years. The problems that happened with Debbie Madden were not problems that started when I was a chief of police, were problems that preceded that. In fact, she had been convicted of a crime prior to that, and because both the police department and the DA's office did not have a Brady policy, that information did not come forward. I am the one that brought this stuff to the public's attention. I am the one that created a Brady policy in the police department, and I am the one that now created a trial integrity unit in the DA's office. And you know why? Because I was involved in developing these issues in LA 10 years ago, and I understand how this stuff works. But I think it's important to recognize that this is a lab that has been starved for funding and for personnel for many years, and neither the chief of police nor anybody working on the lab has controlled that. There has been budgetary decisions that were made by many other people, and there was a police commission that could have been the champion for this and never did, and David Onek was part of that problem.
If you talk to officers and prosecutors in the trenches, what you always hear is the number one thing that's keeping convictions is a lack of trust, a lack of witnesses and victims coming forward and talking about what they've seen, because they don't trust law enforcement. And if you go to almost any major city, you're going to see a lot of that from low-income communities of color, a distrust of law enforcement. The problem is that that distrust is growing exponentially under this DA because of a lack of transparency and a lack of public integrity on a wide range of issues. Charmaine just spoke to one of them. Another one, which the three of us have been discussing, putting out releases on, is this investigation of Rudd and Run that took all of 48 hours max for this DA's office to say that there was nothing there. Now, we're not saying on the merits whether there is something to it or not, but we are saying that we need a fair and impartial investigation. This DA's office should have never investigated that case in the first place because of multiple conflicts that George Gascon and the DA's office have related to that case. Once they did investigate, I hesitate to even use the word investigate, because what can you do in 24 to 48 hours? When something like that happens, it erodes the trust of the public. We've also seen that with the issue of officers under Chief Gascon's watch who, on videotape, allegedly broke into SROs in the Tenderloin and then allegedly perjured themselves about it. Now, again, they're innocent until proven guilty like anyone else. But a fair and thorough investigation cannot be done by the person who was in charge of those officers at the time of those actions.
Many cases that are lost have, on the other hand, have nothing to do with police officers, because police officers oftentimes are not witnesses in domestic violence cases and assault cases, things of that nature. It has to do with the fact that they're trying the wrong case and they're getting pantsed by public defenders and other defense attorneys. People who have been down there know that. They can see that. They know there's a certain energy in the public defender's office, which unfortunately is lacking in the district attorney's office. And Ms. Bach and I are on the same page on this. You need a prosecutor to prosecute.
Well, the reality is that morale in the office is extremely high because I have been involved with prosecutors in working towards the resolution of many of the problems, and we're actually moving forward in getting a lot of things done that were not being done before. The reality is that the office has been led by prosecutors for many years. And I'm not necessarily saying that that was good or bad, but I can't say that bringing another prosecutor that has never run anything, and someone that quite frankly has a lot of problems of their own, is going to be someone that is going to lead this organization to be where it needs to be in the future.
I have a lot of respect for what Kamala Harris has done. She was a prosecutor, and you look at the transformation the office underwent when she came into office. And she brought it a very, very long way. She's implemented some extremely innovative programs that I'd like to see expanded and that I intend to carry out. But, I firmly believe that the momentum that she established, we need to keep it going. We need to keep it going by somebody that's committed to the job for the duration. I look at Chief Gascon. He's had 4 different jobs in 10 years. That doesn't bode well for the longevity of tenure in one particular place. And I think really to do a good job, you need somebody who's going to be there day in and day out, and who's committed to achieving the results that this city deserves. And that's my intent. I also believe that in order to lead prosecutors, as Bill has echoed, you really have to have walked a mile in their shoes. And right now, given where we are at this critical juncture, we cannot be trying things out for the first time. And I think it's also really important to keep it real. The references to leadership or, line prosecutor or whatever, let's keep it real. Let's look at the leadership and the track record of that leadership. Right? Frankly, I think it's better to lead 2 lawyers well than an entire department and having dropped the ball in many regards, in very serious ways. And I think that's what we're seeing. I have a lot of respect for what Chief Gascon has done with regard to law enforcement. I mean, he's been a very good cop. But this is not a cop's job. This is not a management job. When somebody comes into your office and asks you for advice on what case do you charge, you can't say, hang on, let me go ask somebody.
Been there and done that and can do that. Somebody will back them up, not unlike what's happened in the public defender's office, going back to Jeff Brown, continuing through Jeff Adachi, where the district attorney on occasion would come to court. I was asked a question, does the district attorney have to be a trial attorney? Or does he have to try cases? No, the district attorney does not have to try cases, but it certainly helps if he can. I think Charmaine said earlier, you kind of have to walk in the shoes of the person that you're trying to guide in the future. So I would bring energy and enthusiasm to that office, training and professionalism, and the office would change within 6 months to be one of the better offices, as it always should have been, but has never quite been.
You know, I got to say, I don't agree that it's just a management job. There's certainly a very strong management component involved, but it's not a management job, because management in a vacuum, without reference to the subject matter that you are managing, is really misguided.
My experience has been one of running complex organizations and actually getting very good results. I did it very early on in the LAPD, did it in Mesa, did it in San Francisco. Interestingly enough, it is the men and women of the SFDA that have come out overwhelmingly to support me, because they have seen firsthand what I have done. I am very hands-on. I work with them. I bring them onto the decision-making process. But at the end of the day, I bring a wealth of experience dealing with budgetary issues, dealing with leadership problems, leading with unions, working in complex environments and getting results. And that's what I bring to the table. And frankly, none of the other candidates here do.